Hello, everyone. This is Christina Barr, and you're watching Black Tea News. Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I am your host, Christina Barr, and today we are going to be talking about how Joe Biden said, hey, there's no federal solution to COVID. And so that was the talk of yesterday that I did not see until after the show. So I apologize for that. I hate everybody coming in. I got South Carolina there and checking in the comments. How you guys doing? Yeah, everybody was talking about it. It was lighting up Twitter yesterday. So we're gonna be catching up a bit today. A lot to unpack there, especially since Biden is progressively just looking like he just always never had a plan. Which there was a funny line in the debate when Pence was going up against Kamala Harris, and he mentioned that the Joe Biden plan sounds like what they were already doing, but of course Joe Biden is a plagiarist. Which, if you're unaware with Joe Biden's history, when he first ran for president, he got in trouble for that. On top of other things, lying about participating in the civil rights movement, lying about his grades in college, things that people can look up. But it's amazing that he still lies so brazenly now, even especially since people can just like pull up a clip on the internet and look at this stuff. But I mean, it's bad that they lied about that stuff back in the day, but obviously they lie about that stuff now and they think that there's going to be no repercussions. But anyway, we're going to be definitely talking about Biden and the shift that they're doing. What does it mean? Also, some people were asking me questions about what I thought about the Candace Owens Trump interview. I have not seen the whole thing, but I saw clips going around with their conversation regarding Trump and the vaccines. And so there's a lot of people obviously who feel very leery about it, and Trump's very proud of it. So they want to know my thoughts on it and Trump's reaction to it. I think his reaction is pretty obvious. He's the one who instigated Operation Warp Speed, and he's not about to just like throw his baby out in the bathwater. That's just not who Trump is. So we'll talk about that and watch a little snippet of that clip as well. And also, there's like this phenomenon going on right now. If you're on TikTok or if you watch like accounts like on TikTok, no, I'm sorry, Twitter, there's a libs of TikTok where they post all these crazy videos. If you guys follow me on Saturdays, when I play some crazy videos on Saturdays, maybe you've seen some of these really off the wall teachers, young teachers who are really, really into pushing gender ideology and a bunch of other things. And there's some teachers that are way teaching kids way before it's early appropriate to teach those things, and they don't care. And we talked 2 weeks ago before I went on vacation for Christmas about how in California there were teachers who were recruiting people and teaching other teachers how to recruit students to get in these particular clubs to make sure that they're not official, so there's no official record of it. So if parents ask if their kids are in those clubs, they can just play dumb and be like, well, I don't know. And there was a one account with a student who was 12, a girl who they convinced was trans, and they changed her pronouns, they changed her medical records, and they didn't include like things like bee stings and stuff like that when they changed the records. And then they called the parents to the school, alerted the mother and father that their child was now a boy. And when they didn't react the way that they wanted them to react, they called the CPS on the parents. So I think that parents need to be very aware that there's this growing movement of people who resent you and your relationship with your child, and they think that you are an obstacle, and they want to supersede you if they can't bully you into affirming their ideology, not even what's best for the kid, just their ideology that they want to enforce on your malleable child. Then they will figure out a way to go around you. And as a matter of fact, that was part of their lessons to other teachers, how to navigate doing these sort of things even in conservative neighborhoods. So I probably myself would never have a child in public schools, but I know they say it's not an option for everybody. And there's people who obviously still want to keep their kids in public schools and they want to go to school board meetings and fight back and all the other kind of stuff. So you got to be vigilant with this stuff. So I'm going to play at least 2 videos from that crazy stuff today. And just I want to warn you guys. I want to warn you guys about the sort of climate that's going on right now, and you really got to be vigilant. You really got to be vigilant. Before we jump into all that stuff, I do want to encourage you guys to go blacktnews.com, check out different content that I have on the website. I have different articles on there. One that is I guess relevant to the topic is an article I wrote regarding my Blue's Clues video when I talked about how Blue's Clues was indoctrinating children about like pansexuality, non-binary, trans stuff, and had drag queens and whatnot on the show. And most people agreed that it was inappropriate. But there were some people who were upset because they said that children have to learn these things because they need to learn to be accepting. Everybody needs to learn to be accepting. And I'm like, there's the reason why people want to teach these things is not because they want the children to be accepting, is because they're trying to vicariously live through these children and have them reaffirm their worldview. It's and people say, well, kids, they can understand. They're so easy. It's so easy for them to understand. They're very smart. You can explain things to they're malleable. That's why you want these. That's why you want to get the hands on the kids, because they're very malleable. So not because they can discern well, because they're malleable. And there's people who obviously want to take advantage of the trust that parents have. And in that particular video, I talked about how they lure people in with nostalgia bait, like they brought back Steve, got people all comfortable and with how things used to be, and they went back down memory lane and said, "Oh my gosh, I love Steve. I remember back in the days when I watched Blue's Clues." And then they set their own kids in front of the TV and they pour into all this stuff into your kids' heads, and they try to indoctrinate them into this new wave of stuff they got going on. So Blue's Clues isn't the only franchise that does this. A lot of the franchises, so many of them do it. You know, there was a family I went to school with, and they could not watch TV. They could not watch movies, and I always thought that was so weird. I'm like, that is a lot, and it was for they were a religious family. I don't know what denomination they were, and I don't know. I'm starting to see the wisdom in that, man. Starting to see the wisdom in that. But anyway, there's people who try to supersede your trust as a parent because they feel like you are an obstacle. So that was really my main point, my main concern with that video that I did. And most people agreed, but there are people who there was a little bit of backlash about it. So I went ahead and wrote an article about it, and my point keeps being proven by all these people, all these teachers who are bold enough to go on TikTok and say, you know what, I'm coming for your kids, and I'm going to indoctrinate them, and so on. So check out articles like that on my website, blacktnews.com. Also got other sort of articles about critical race theory and whatnot. So check out what's on the website. If you enjoy what I do, please go to blacktnews.com/donate. Appreciate people putting in stuff yesterday. Saw that. Thank you guys so very much. If you like what I do here, you want to see it grow further, faster, you can be a part of that. We've had a lot of growth here at Black T News over the past year. I just joined, for example, TikTok in February, and I'm already at like 84,000 followers on that particular app. And so I just thank you guys for contributing, for you guys for watching, for you guys for sharing, for you guys liking my different pages on social media. You guys know I'm on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and all my handles are at Black T News. The only one that is different is at Twitter. I do ask, I know a lot of you watch live on Facebook, but if you do have a YouTube, I do ask that you find me on YouTube. If you go to blacktnews.com, you can find all of my social media links. I do ask that you subscribe to all those places. It will help grow the I mean, obviously will help grow the channel, but there's different privileges that will unlock the more people that subscribe. So even if you do prefer to watch on Facebook or other places, I do ask that you still do subscribe in these other locations so you can also help continue to grow Black Tea. So got some people watching from Florida, free Florida. Oh, it seems like everybody is running to Florida, not just to live, but just to also visit as well. I just want to go out there. It seems so nice. It's Michigan's not so bad right now because the governor's not a total moron, so she's not imposing a bunch of lockdowns and stuff like she did last year. For political reasons, I'm sure, but she was awful. She was awful. And I've talked about a lot about her on the show, but I hope she does not get reelected. Please check out different merchandise that we have on blacktnews.com, like the My Money, My Business shirt, the Black Tea mug, got that going on. And these I voted for President Trump, and all I got was historic peace bills, border security, ISIS destroyed, and so on. I'm not the victim you're looking for. And of course, we got the goat hoodie. You guys can check that out. And also, I do have books that you guys can check out as well. This is my historical fiction fantasy series. I do have other books that are contemporary fiction, paranormal romance, so on. This is my faith book, my only nonfiction book, Slay Your Fear: How to Overcome a Spirit of Fear. And also, thank you guys for Super Kid. People who've gotten for their kids, people who have reviewed it and liked it, and I thank you guys who bought it for Christmas for their kids and really enjoyed it. That means a lot to me. People inviting me basically to be part of their Christmas. That's how I look at it. I really appreciate it. I've heard kids trying to get their other classes and stuff to read it, and which if any schools and stuff want to do that, I am willing to like do some kind of FaceTime and stuff. I love visiting schools. And also, if any like organization and group is interested in me coming and talking about critical race theory and things like that, I've done things like that. I'm interested in doing that. I'm willing to help in any sort of regard to fight back the indoctrination that's happening across the country. So I just want to put that out there that I'm willing to do that as well. So thank you guys. So let's jump into the news of the day. So before I talk about the Biden thing, I do want to get on a little soapbox a little bit. So when Biden was talking about not extending the student loan thing, it set off a big shockwave or screech, I guess, cry out on the left. And we talked about on our show when on the Breakfast Club, Charlemagne gave Biden the donkey of the day. And there were other people. There's this really big account on TikTok, Consciously. He complained about Biden, and he's like, we knew he went on and on and on about Biden and how he was going back on his word and so on. And then he said something was pretty curious as he was complaining. He said, we knew you were dishonest and a liar, but we voted for you over Trump. And that just blew my mind and blew a lot of people's mind. And the first time I saw his video that when I decided to respond to it was when someone highlighted that part about how he said, we knew that you were dishonest. He even called him Joe Byron to mock him off of that viral video that's been going on where someone was like, who's the president? Byron. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It's a little funny, but but people have taken that sound and done a bunch of things with it. So he mocked him a little bit, but he said, we knew you were gonna lie, you were lying and you weren't keeping your promises, but we voted for you over Trump. So if you knew he was a liar and you just picked him over Trump, it just blew my mind. So I made the point that Charlemagne and Charlemagne was upset about them going back on the student loan thing. And that's why he gave him this donkey of the day, because they had someone from the administration talking about student loan like the week before, a few days before, and they kind of skated around things and they knew that they were going to go back on it. And Joe Biden has had his hand in the Senate for a very long time. And he actually is the reason why you can't actually do bankruptcy on like the student loan. So if you understand Biden's voting record, you would know that was a promise that probably wasn't going to get fulfilled. Now, I think you should, pay your debts as far as like the student loan stuff. And a lot of people who go to college like people like Rashida Tlaib got up and was like, we didn't just try to waste it. I got this job as a lawyer and I had these debts and I was working them off. I'm like, and now you're a congresswoman. Look at you go. Look at you go. So you really don't need people who decide not to go to college to subsidize you going to college, because people make those own decisions. Now, there are pouring so much money and government interference has really made the cost of college go up, but that's a conversation really for another day. But anyway, there was all this information on Joe Biden to prove that he was not good for this particular topic. And the people are admitting they knew that they couldn't trust him, but they decided to pick him because he was not Trump. Now, that's incredible to me, because you cannot like Trump. And a lot of people don't like Trump for not legitimate reasons. Like, I can understand if you don't like his style, you don't like his brashness, you don't like his tweets, you don't like, if you don't like his policies, you don't like his policies. But a lot of people on the left, who, at least, especially like on like TikTok and all these other social media apps, they don't actually know legitimate reasons why they don't like Trump. They'll say that he's a racist, and then it's like, well, what do you mean by that? And they'll go to this big Vox article that will point out a bunch of things that aren't really relevant. And maybe I should, I don't know, debunk that thing, I guess. But they'll go to that list, and I'm like, okay, but Joe Biden said I'm not black if I don't vote for him. He lied in a black church to black voters about participating in the civil rights movement. What about Clarence Thomas and how he treated him and the high-tech lynching, of him? What about when he said that to Latinos, unlike the African American community, the Latino community is incredibly diverse about a bunch of different things. And I actually had someone who tried to defend Joe Biden the other day. It was a black person. I said, this is not a hill that you want to go die on. I promise you. Because even if he had said that black people vote primarily Democrat, there's no debate about that. But he's talking about issues. So you believe that black people, no matter where you go across the country, no matter what issue you're talking about, like we just aren't diverse. It's all lockstep. That doesn't make any sense at all. It's just not true. That's not my experience, certainly. And if I say something different that goes off script from what they believe, then I start to get berated. So they know people have different thoughts, especially black people, but they just resent when we have different thoughts that they didn't allow us to have. So anyway, there's all this evidence of recent things I can point to Joe Biden. I don't have to go all the way back to like the 1970s with Trump and working for his dad. And did they or did they not rent to black people or something like that? I can just point to Joe Biden on the campaign trail. So they have reasons why they believe they voted for Biden over Trump that aren't even really legitimate when you really press them. Now, if you are a leftist, and if you're a Democrat and you're just a Democrat and you want to vote the way of the Democrats and you think they're going to do certain things, then yeah, vote for your guy. I voted for my guy. That makes sense. But a lot of reasons why people convince themselves why they hate Trump just didn't make sense. So I said in my reply that Democrats rely on their voters being emotionally charged instead of factually informed. Period. Now, this got a pretty good response, and then a bigger account than mine actually duetted it, so their video just shot right up. We're going to do a collaboration soon. And so some people started pushing back a little bit on me, and they said, don't you think Republicans also rely on emotion? And I said, that's not the point of my video. My point, because I think you should be emotional about some things. And I'm going to mention some things today that I hope stir you up and I hope make you emotional about them. But my point is that Democrats rely on you being emotionally charged rather than factually informed. And so when someone challenged me on this, I brought up this particular example. Now, many of you know, if you've read about this on blacktnews.com, or maybe you remember when I did the video about it right after this happened. But during the summer, I went to a Democrat Party picnic. Okay. They did not know I was a Republican. I just showed up and it had my name tag. I don't think they signed down my name and on my stuff with really anything. And I had nice pleasant conversations with people. I did not tip them off. And I was honest about, I was careful about information that I gave, but I was honest. I'm not lying for nobody. So I was honest about who what I sort of did. I told people I'm a writer, and so I actually gave someone my page and stuff. And so, so we had like pleasant conversations. But things that I heard, like within people's conversations, there was a common theme between them, and even common themes between what people were actually talking about. As far as elected officials who were there, they believe Republicans have no empathy and don't care about people. And that's a pretty bold thing to just believe. But Justice Bernstein, he's a Democrat. He sits on our Michigan Supreme Court, and he also said I love being a Democrat because Democrats actually care about people. And he also said, you have to go back and read the article, because I did record like the video of it. I think I have that on the maybe the article too. But he said something along the lines of, what makes a great justice isn't like how well you read or how well studied you are with the law. It's your empathy for people or something like that. And I'm like, that is not why you get elected to the Supreme Court, but okay. And so that they were just like, empathy, feels. And so, but Republicans don't feel. Obviously, we don't care about our family. We don't care about our friends. We don't care about our neighborhoods. It's just only Democrats can care about people. Of course, it's absurd, but that's what they were kind of saying. So it was a little alarming. And if I go to Republican events, Republicans will make comments about Democrats and stuff. I that maybe are sometimes out of pocket, but this is out there, right? So I heard the county chair mention that they needed people to run for school board. And because, the Republicans were fired about the critical race theory and the mask mandates and so on. So when it was over, I made sure that I confronted her, and I said, is critical race theory a hill that Democrats want to die on? And I'm like giving solid advice right now. And I mentioned to her that I've looked at polling, and polling for different ethnicities on critical race theory are trend negative. The only ones that are like positive right now are Black people. But I promise you, as more information comes out, everyone will hate it. The more people are informed, actually informed about what the literature says, not what Nicole Hannah-Jones says, not what Joy Reid says, not what people on TikTok with their hot takes say. What's actually written in the literature of critical race theory, because it just creates a more divisive world to tear down our world, to rebuild their. People think Marxism is just to hear it and it's a trigger word or whatever, but it's their little silly utopia of nonsense. Okay, so one quote in a book that Kimberly Crenshaw wrote said critical race theorists embrace subjectivity, not objectivity. They're avowedly political. Okay, so it's not honest history if it's about being avowedly political and not objective. In critical race theory and introduction, and that's Stefanchik and Delgado. They talk about how it's a worldview. So it's not about honest history. So the more people learn about it and the different tenets of it, and how you're not supposed to be colorblind, and that law isn't supposed to be, that neutral laws are bad. And I've written about this stuff on blacktnews.com and done videos on it and so on. So if you need some resources, you can go to the website and check that stuff out. But it's not good stuff. So I said, like, is this a hill that Democrats want to die on? And so she says, well, it's racism. And I said, no. I said, critical race theory is racism. So I begin to explain to her a couple things. And I said, I don't know how much you've looked into it. And then she admits to me, this white woman, by the way, this white woman admits to me that she has not looked into it. Okay. So me, the concerned Black constituent maybe she's not unaware still that I am a Republican. Um, she just knows I am a concerned Black woman who is educated on this topic, and she is not. And I'm saying, is this a hill Democrats want to die on? I think this ideology is racist. And as I am pushing back on her, she eventually gets frustrated and says, I've seen these people who go to these school board meetings. It's racism. They're racism. I've seen into their eyes. I've seen into the depths of their soul. They're foaming at the mouth. She just says this crazy stuff about parents, concerned parents who go to these school board meetings, who are concerned that their kids are being targeted and taught that they are evil, that they're racist and terrible. Okay. She says these things to me, and I am stunned for a moment. For a moment, I don't think it was that long, and I just kind of gather myself and I say, "Can you look beyond the people and just look at the issue?" And then she just says, "We just need people to run for school board." Okay? So let's go back to my original point. My original point of telling the story is that Democrats rely on their voters being emotionally charged rather than factually informed. Now, people been trying to push what aboutism and say, well, Republicans want people to be emotional, and someone attacked my Christianity and they're like, well, Christians want people to be emotional. Yes, I want you to hear this story, and I want you to be emotional about it. Okay, I want you to be outraged that this white woman looked me dead in my eye, and knowing that I knew more about this topic than she did, that she admitted that she had not looked into it, but she thought she could get me to back down. She thought she could emotionally manipulate me by saying the people who are against critical race theory are racist, and that she knows them, assuming I don't, that I've never had a Republican family member or friend or whatever, that I don't know any of these people are going to these PTA meetings and whatnot and fighting for their kids, that I can just take her word for it and just accept that they're racist. So me knowing that that's how they operate, that they'll slander these people who they think have no empathy and love for other people. They literally don't care about other people. That's the theme, right? I want you to be upset when you hear that, and I want you to be factually informed, okay? Because you should know that people will try to manipulate with you with things like racism. Like she tried to manipulate me with racism. But unfortunately for her, I'm factually informed. So she could not manipulate me in the way that she wanted to manipulate me. So, like I said, Democrats rely on their voters to be emotionally charged rather than factually informed. There's other examples I could give, but and there were other examples that I thought about giving to that woman. or to the people I was replying to on TikTok when they tried to push back against me. But I'm like, no, that's a really good one. That's a really solid one. That particular example. So if you haven't read about that day, you can go to blacktnews.com and read that article. That was one of my most popular on my website, that experience. And it was quite telling, and people found it really fascinating because maybe they don't realize how divided our world is. Like, you can go online, you can see it, but to just be in a nice little picnic setting, we're all eating shawarma, hanging out, like, we're so much, we have empathy and they don't. Like, do you not know other people like outside of your bubble? And I thought about interrupting some conversation sometimes and being like, you know what, my dad's a Republican, like, that's not cool. But I didn't want to tip anybody off at that point until it was over about my identity. And so I didn't, but but you don't have any like friends and family who are just good people who just think differently than you? And it's so wild because they weren't bad people themselves. They just believed a really bad thing. And I had good conversations, and there's people there who I wouldn't mind hanging out with again. That we had good conversations, and it was polite, it was friendly. But that is a terrible just belief to thrust on other people, you know? Another thing about Biden and just his whole election in 2020, they were really running on people being emotionally charged rather than factually informed. Like, who are the types of people who would interview Joe Biden? Cardi B and other celebrities. Um, Joe Biden, when they asked him about packing the Supreme Court, I think I mentioned this the other day. He was like, "No, we're not changing the subject. That's what they want me to talk about." But it's like they're going to answer the question after the election. And you guys are just going to stand for that. So, there were lots of times people they really wanted you to be emotionally charged rather than factually informed. They kept saying, "Get your ballots, turn them in. Get your ballots, turn them in. Get your ballots, turn them in." Like I that was like the theme of like the DNC convention. I just remember Michelle going, "Get your ballot, turn it in." And I'm like, "Are what you guys don't want like debates first? You don't want to see if there's any kind of October surprise? You don't think there's like any more relevant information that might come out?" Hmm. I don't like early voting, and I've said this before. I think it really, in my opinion, will price out a lot of people. Like, if you're running for president, you got to be able to raise obviously a lot of money, and but there's other local offices that if you're early day voting, that I think it could easily price you out on some things, because you have to run a longer, more expensive campaign. And I don't know how much thought people have put into that little fact. I'm sure consultants who make people who make money from elections probably really enjoy that elections are longer and longer and longer. But I personally think that people should find a way to just have an election day, and I obviously think people should be able to vote absentee. But people just getting the mail and just sending in the way that they do, um, I don't really like that either. But it was very apparent that they wanted people to get their ballots and turn them in. In Michigan, in 2018, they changed our election laws, so you could register to vote on the same day that of when you vote. And our Secretary of State said that the majority of people who utilize that were 30 and under. Now, if you're a 30 and under and you're voting the same day you registered, how informed do you think that voter is? So I think people should vote, but I want people to be informed when they vote. I don't think people should just participate to participate. I think you should be a little informed, you know? And there's people who rely on me. I'll get messages like, "Hey, can you give me some information?" And I'll give them information. Um and that's fine if you there's people you trust and get information from, but there's people who are just swayed and shoveled into like sheep, like sheep into the voting booth. And there's people who would not have even voted, but people talk about voter suppression. People were actually pressured into voting for Joe Biden. There was this really creepy commercial in 2020 that played on a local station. I was watching Vampire in Brooklyn. So this was like an urban um like network, Bounce TV. So they played Vampire in Brooklyn. It was a movie about Eddie Murphy turned into a vampire. Well, he was a vampire, and he was seducing this woman who was this cop. I think she was a cop. I'm pretty sure it's a cop. I think so. Or she liked a cop. I don't know. But anyway, they played during the commercial. They played a video from like a PAC that said, "If you do not vote, people will be able to see it." And it was how they just arranged it, how it was. It made it seem like people will be able to look up and see who you voted for. They didn't say that, but that if you weren't kind of trained, that could easily be what they were trying to insinuate. So they played that commercial, then they played that commercial again, then they played a Gary Peters commercial. He was the one who ran. He was a Democrat running for Senate, and then they played Joe Biden commercial, and then they played I think another Biden commercial, and then they played the two PAC commercials again, saying people will be able to see whether you voted or not. And people told me that they got mail that said similar stuff as well. Now people cannot look up who and see who you voted for, but if people are know how much heck that people got in 2016 for voting for Trump or not voting at all, people really went after people who voted for a third party or didn't vote. So if you did not want to be harassed in such a way, and you see people can look up and see how you voted, and of course that's not what they said, but if that's the impression that you got, then maybe you went out and voted. And I see so many people on social media saying things like, you people made me vote for Joe. Not that they wanted to, but they felt like they were forced into doing it. Now, of course, people did what they wanted to do. But that doesn't mean that they did not face some kind of intimidation to vote. So if we're going to have voters, we need to have voters who are informed. My last example before I go into this Biden thing is one of my favorite examples. And I wish I had it queued up, but I have shared in the past these tweets from when Trump and Biden were doing the second debate. And Trump was asked this, and by the way, the story broke like the day of the debate or the day before, about how there were some children still separated from their parents. And so, of course, Trump was asked this question. And by the way, don't you guys think it was interesting that they did not have a foreign policy debate? And of course, they didn't have a foreign policy debate focused on that particular issue, because Trump obviously would have dominated and he had a lot of things that he could brag at the time. But considering the fact that how poorly Afghanistan went, don't you think that was really, really, really relevant? And it's a crime that we did not have such a thing. So anyway, they mentioned, hey, Trump, these kids aren't reunited. And he said some of these people didn't come with families over here. Some of these people came with coyotes. And then all of a sudden there was all these tweets from verified check mark people on Twitter. There's people who are elected officials from different states that were saying things like, coyotes. How's a coyote going to bring an entire child over here? And they're just laughing at Trump like he's such a moron. And I'm going through these tweets, and I've posted them on my Facebook. I've reposted them. It's just really an incredible thing. Really, really incredible that there's so many people that did not know that coyotes are people who will bring people across the border. And we're not talking about Wile E. Coyote. We're talking about like professional criminals. And it's fine if you don't know what a coyote is. That's totally fine. But if you're going to mock Trump as if he's a moron for mentioning this phrase, you would think that maybe you'd know. And if this is going to be like an issue, there's some people who voted solely against Trump. Like there's Allie Stuckley said she knew a lot of Christians, or quite a few rather. I'm sure it's probably not a lot, but Christians who voted specifically because of the border issue, because they didn't like Trump's border policies and how kids were separated, and all the media and the negativity that was going on, that they voted against Trump on that issue. But if that was a thing that moved you and that made Trump such a monster in your eyes, even though when you saw the pictures of the kids in cages, that was from the Obama Biden era. Who built those cages, Joe? Of course, they were Joe and Obama. If that's a thing that motivated you and pushed you to vote against Trump, then how is it possible that you are not informed in this issue enough to know what a darn coyote is? So you have a lot of people who are emotionally charged, but they are not factually informed. Again, I'm not making the case that Republicans do not charge their base to be emotional. And I've said it a few times. I want to be emotional about some of the discussions that we're having. But like I mentioned with critical race theory, the more you look into critical race theory, the more you are going to dislike it. I promise you. There's a lot of people who don't know a lot about it. And that's why they go to meetings at places, events where I talk about it. Okay. So people can get informed on those particular issues. And maybe even though they may know of it, maybe they can't articulate it in the best sort of way. That's fine. But the more that they study it, the more they know that this is a bad thing. I had a rule of thumb when I worked for the Michigan Republican Party. When I did hit pieces, and they were hit pieces about Hillary Clinton and whatever other kind of Democrats, I wanted to make sure that whatever clip or whatever that I used in the context that I was using it in wasn't like just some kind of hit and run thing where it was but deceptive. because Democrats I've seen just do like monstrously dishonest sort of propaganda that was effective, sure, very effective, but dishonest, that invoked a lot of emotions. Like there was the I think it was Ed Gillespie um campaign where it looked like he was running down um maybe uh people of color in his car or something. So of course that was a despicable video. People talked about how despicable it was, but people found that that ad was, as much as like people on the right and other people were criticizing how terrible it was, people found that was an effective ad. People found that was an effective ad. I never wanted to make something that you look into it and the deeper the context is or whatever, that it's just dishonest. I wanted to make things where if you look up more into it, oh gosh, it's going to be pretty bad. Like I did the 50 one of the my top videos I did, actually was my top video, was 50 reasons not to vote for Hillary Clinton. And I the video was 50, gave you 50 reasons, and a lot of it was just her talking. A few of them were her quotes, and if you looked into it deeper, there that you weren't going to dismantle what was on it. I wanted to make sure that there was always substance to what I was presenting. At least that's my rule. At least that was my personal rule. Not everybody does that. There's a lot of campaigns that are just like, I want to just stab you and let you bleed out, and I don't care if it was justified or not. I didn't operate like that. I didn't operate like that, especially because I well, one, I just found it to be dishonest, but two, you don't want somebody come back and debunk you on that anyway. If you have a disagreement, you have a disagreement. But I didn't want somebody to come back and debunk and said what I did was dishonest. So I think the more facts, the better. And if the facts presented can get me to change my mind because I don't have the right information, then I'm the type of person like, you know what? Yeah, you're right. But Democrats, not how it goes. They rely on you being misinformed. Speaking of someone who is totally misinformed, let's talk about the president now, because like I said yesterday, people were flipping out because Joe Biden said that he said that there is no federal solution to the vaccine, that's going to be a state issue. Now, what's interesting about that is that when Trump was president, he was trying. Now, he didn't, in my opinion, sometimes he like faltered on this a bit, but most of the time he was like, "This is going to be a state's issue. We want these governors to be empowered." And a lot of people are calling Mike Pence. Mike Pence was over sort of the task force, and at first Cuomo and Newsom, the press would ask them how Trump was doing, and they really wanted negativity. And they said, guys, I know that you want me to rag on Trump, but they're actually doing a really good job. They're making sure that they got what they needed. And Trump turned to like the private sector. They had people making ventilators because there was a shortage on those, and then we ended up having too many. They were really overusing that at the beginning days when we first didn't know a lot about it, I guess. Ventilators, they had private sector companies like My Pillow would turn their factory into a mask making factory. And he spoke out at Michael Lindell got to speak at the White House, and he said some positive things about Trump, and he talked about Jesus Christ. And man, the media was so mad. The media was so mad about Mike Lindell talking about Jesus. Trump. They're like, oh my gosh, separation of church and state. They were so angry about it. And but Trump they'd have their recommendations, but they weren't going to do any sort of mandates. And he kept saying, we don't need the cure to be worse than the virus. And when there was a lot of states that were really coming down against churches and stuff, Trump tried to do like the executive order that said, hey, your church is essential, which I believe your church should be essential. Your worship is essential. And of course, it was protected by the First Amendment. And there were people who pushed back. Hezekiah Walker, who did the song Every Praise is to Our God. He said he wasn't opening up his church until the White House opened up its doors for visitors. That was insane. That was insane. And I was really disappointed to hear that, because then he went ahead and he performed at the George Floyd funeral. So it's amazing what politics can get in the way of you actually just running your church, bruh. So, and maybe he thought it was okay for him to take that risk, and he still wasn't going to open up his church. But I don't know. But no, why would you go? Why would you still go? Why would you still go to perform at that funeral if you felt that way? So I felt politics got in a lot away of a lot of stuff, and there are other pastors who spoke out about Trump, and they thought what he was doing was political. Now, perhaps what he did was political, saying that your church is essential, but of course, you should not need a politician to tell you that. You shouldn't need a politician to tell you that and to affirm that. So even if it was political on his part, you should just be like, well, bro, I didn't need you to do this, and I need you to tell me this. Of course, my church was essential. So, but they couldn't just take it because people didn't like Trump. So Trump tried to allow states to do what they needed to do, and of course, different states responded differently. Florida was the freer state that people wanted to escape to. Michigan and Ohio, though Ohio's a red state, a lot of things were similar at first, but then Ohio would do something and it seemed like Michigan was following the lead, but then Michigan just went really, really dark with their lockdown measures. And then eventually people were like escaping Michigan to go to Ohio, cross the border to get their hair cut. When my nephew first got his hair, he had long curly hair. When he first got his hair cut, they took him across the border to Ohio. He got his hair cut really short. He was like, "Oh my gosh, my baby's growing up." When it was my mom's birthday, we went to the mall in Ohio, and we went to Longhorn, I think it was, and everyone around us in the restaurant were from Michigan. Everyone around us. People were leaving like bowling championships or teams, leagues or whatever, and they were going down to Ohio so they could still bowl. So Michigan was losing a lot of business as people were going other places where it was a little bit free. So of course different states did different things, and Trump could have been authoritative and did some kind of big, we're all going to do things this way. Of course, people would have complained and called him tyrannical, I believe, regardless. But he decided not to do that. Now, there were some states that I think maybe I'm thinking about Georgia, that they started opening faster than maybe he would have liked. And he would tweet like, "You guys are going too fast." And it's like, slow your roll, dude. Like, what are you talking about? So, but ultimately he did not have some kind of strict authority. Now, people hated Florida because DeSantis is the Republican governor, and then they uplifted Cuomo because he was their face that was resistant to Trump. He wrote this book about leadership, which he had to end up paying like money back for it, which is hilarious. And of course, he's no longer governor because he's a scumbag. But people were saying they're Cuomo-sexuals. People were so into him at the time. And they liked that he was doing these lockdown measures, even though he was really rude to people and terrible. And of course, the reason why a lot of elderly people died and they tried to like hide it. And Newsom was awful with his lockdown measures. So many people in California, I remember so many different videos people posting. There was one woman who did everything she could to renovate her restaurant so she could have stuff for outdoor dining. And then they said that they couldn't do that. And so she organized a protest. And so she went to her place to get some stuff for the protest. And then she saw that a movie studio was like right there, and they had caterers who had set out food. And she's like, how is it possible that they can do this, but I can't? I'm like right across from them, but I can't have outdoor food. I can't service the people outside. So we definitely got to a point where the cure was worse, in my opinion. And I always thought we were going to get there anyway with how bad things were, because very early on I saw an article that was like, after COVID, if we have all this stuff shut down, it's going to disrupt supply chains and so on, and it's going to lead to a lot of people starving. I'm like, this sounds bad. Does it sound bad to you? It sounds bad to me. It sounds like it's not going to be worth it in the end. It sounds like it's not going to be worth it in the end. So doesn't matter. So Joe Biden, he really flipped people out the other day.
Look, there is no federal solution. This gets solved at a state level.
That was it. People were flipping out. People were flipping out because he said that there is no solution. So here's the question, because as soon as he became like president, they decided like, hey, you're gonna have to wear masks on federal property, which his family did not do when they were taking pictures and whatnot after he got inaugurated. So shame on them. He doesn't always adhere to all of his mask rules and so on, though he really tries to do things for show, but of course it's just for show. So why are we in a position that we have to fight these mandates if there's not a federal thing that you guys can do, that it has to be regulated to the states? Why are people taking you all the way to the Supreme Court if this is something that can only be settled statewide as opposed to federal overreaching government? Because he admitted originally that they didn't have the sort of authority to do the things that they were doing, but they went ahead and decided to figure out how they could ghetto rig it anyway using OSHA. So now we're at this point where we're facing a turn, and he's pointing out the obvious. Now federal solutions aren't normally the solution anyway, because all of our states are different. All of our states are different. And people decide where to live based on the sort of culture of their states. And yes, different cities can have different sort of political leanings and ways that they function and so on. But there's a reason why people are leaving California and they're going to Texas, or leaving California and going to Florida, or they're leaving Michigan and they're going to Florida, or, there's reasons. There's reasons why, like Vermont, they said the hospitals were plugged up with people who I think had COVID but had no symptoms. And it's like, this is a very, 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 very blue place. Their senator is Bernie Sanders, who is he's independent because, but of course he ran as a Democrat for president, but he's a socialist, he'll say Democrat socialist, but it's a very blue place, obviously, Vermont. And you can't blame any sort of their hysteria on anything other than they need help mentally. And so it was just interesting because they have very high vaccination rates, but they are plugging up hospitals, yet people who aren't having serious symptoms. Why are you even going to the hospital? I know people who had COVID, tested positive, and they ain't even give them cold medicine. They're just like, you'll be okay, go home. And of course, I'm mostly talking about, well, there's some older people, but mostly young people. They're like, oh, you tested. You're like, just chill out at home for a little bit. Which, by the way, the CDC is no longer doing like a 10-day quarantine. They're taking it down to like 5-day. Pretty interesting. So we are seeing this turn here. I did mention the other day how there's starting to be this admission by people that cloth masks don't work, which you've known this for a while. We've known this for a while, and we've had to argue with so many people about this. It's amazing. People look you dead in the eye and be like, my mask doesn't protect me, but I'm protecting you with this mask. I'm just like, your cloth mask doesn't work. It's just basically a teddy bear on your face comforting you. And so now you have people who are beginning to admit it. So Lena Wynn on CNN has said this several times now, but this is something they weren't saying before. But this is something that they're admitting now.
Cloth masks are not appropriate for this pandemic. It's not appropriate for Omicron. It was not appropriate for Delta, Alpha, or any of the previous variants either, because we're dealing with something that's airborne.
So she also said the other day that it was nothing more than a facial decoration, basically. But these cloth masks are what they've been forcing on kids for the longest time. One day I played a video. It was NPR. They did an interview with a teacher's classroom with kids, and the kids started talking about their mask and how they can't breathe, and I think one kid was like, when I wear my mask, it makes me think of being in outer space because I can't breathe. And it's like, this is awful. And the teacher's just like, thank you guys. I didn't realize I didn't realize so many of you disliked your mask. And so it's like, you guys are great. And I'm like, and you are trash, lady. Like, all of you are trash for putting these kids through this, knowing that they face such little risk at all, these kids, but you're making them wear these masks that kids are such germ factories. Like, what do you think you're doing with these masks? Like, Biden, he will wear his mask, he will pull it down, cough in his hand, and then pull up his mask. Like, there's so many videos of Biden doing that. It's not like a one-time replay occurrence. There are several videos of Biden doing that. So if he's doing that, it's old man Biden. My nephew has more sense to just like cough and sneeze in his hand and stuff like that. Like, you know, there was one time Jake Tapper was lecturing somebody. I don't know if it was Biden or somebody else, some other Democrat, but lecturing like, you know, just go in your like that or something, but don't do it like directly in your hand like that. So it was giving like on live instructions in which the manner of how they coughed. So, but if Biden really feels like there's not a federal solution, then all these, why take this all the way up to the Supreme Court? Maybe they're mentioning it now just to sort of brace for it getting shot down, which I hope to God it gets shot down at the Supreme Court, these mandates. And I'm sure they'll still blame it on the tyrannical, you know, right-wing conservative courts. And they're like, well, Biden tried to save people, but they wouldn't let him. These Trump justices wouldn't let him, and let that be that. But I do think it's interesting. Now, yesterday with the turn on the mask and then the CDC dropping it from the 10 days to 5 days, maybe they realize that inflation is too bad. Maybe they realize that that it's going to be disastrous for Democrats. I'm sure they're seeing some polling. We talked about a little bit the other day. Afghanistan was like in the 20s. The economy was bad, either like 20s, 30s. Like it was a lot of things he was polling in the 20s and 30s about his handling of a lot of things, and they realize how wiped out they're going to get in the midterms, allegedly. Like that is the educated guess right now. We can only assume. Republicans can always mess stuff up, but Democrats really mess things up themselves. So we will see. But that is the logical thinking right now, that they're going to get shellacked and that Republicans are going to take back the House and they're going to take back the Senate. So maybe they're trying to course correct a little bit if they can with some of this COVID stuff. But I think it's too late in a lot of regard. And some people speculate that since Trump has been taking credit for Operation Warp Speed and is still like, that's my thing, bruh. It's a miracle. It's great. That maybe they'll start to admit a little bit that they haven't been as perfect as they would have liked, and then blame that on Trump. I think that's an interesting theory. I'm not one for like jumping on this is what I think is going to happen, but I think it's an interesting theory. So people have asked me my opinion about Trump on Candace Owens' show the other day, and she did an interview with him, and he defended the vaccines quite a bit. So I'm going to play a little bit of that interview, of that segment.
Where do you stand on these vaccine mandates? And obviously, I know that you are pro-vaccine. Obviously, you did everything you could to get this vaccine out. I know where you stand on the vaccine.
It was one of the greatest achievements. We did it in less than 9 months.
To be able to do that. Yeah, but now it's taken a twist, right? It's gotten, now we went from, this is a good thing and people should have this option, to military men, you're going to have to resign because you're not getting this vaccine. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I stand on, forget about the mandates, that people have to have their freedom. But at the same time, the vaccine is one of the greatest achievements of mankind. We would have had in 1917, remember the Spanish flu, killed perhaps 100 million people. Actually, it ended the First World War because the soldiers were so, a lot of people don't know that. The soldiers got so sick. It was a terrible thing. There were no vaccines. There was no anything. I came up with a vaccine, with 3 vaccines. All are very, very good. Came up with 3 of them in less than 9 months. It was supposed to take 5 to 12 years.
And yet more people have died under COVID this year, by the way, under Joe Biden. than under you, and more people took the vaccine this year. So people are questioning how.
Well, no, the vaccine worked, but some people aren't taking it. The ones that get very sick and go to the hospital are the ones that don't take the vaccine. But it's still their choice. And if you take the vaccine, you're protected. Look, the results of the vaccine are very good. And if you do get it, it's a very minor form. People aren't dying when they take the vaccine.
What about the masking of children? That's a big one for moms right now.
I think it's a terrible thing. I think it's a terrible thing.
That flies in the face of science. The kids have a virtual 0% chance of dying of COVID, and yet they're insisting on these vaccine mandates. On these masking mandates, and now even the vaccine mandates for small children. And what's going on there? I
think what's happening is you look at the masks where Fauci and a lot of other people said masks don't mean anything. All of a sudden he becomes a radical masker. Great. I don't like to see the kids with the masks on. They're sitting in school. They have a hard enough time sitting in school.
Looks like China. I've been to China.
And yet China's education system's a hell of a lot better than ours. You know what? They're rated number 2 or 3, and we're rated number 44.
But masking children,
no, it's bad.
The way it looks, right? It doesn't look like a free country.
I'm against it.
So, a few thoughts about that. As I said, Trump was the one who initiated Operation Warp Speed, which he of course, he didn't invent the vaccine. They empowered the private sector, as he did with a lot of things involving his leadership style was doing these partnerships with the private sector. Government doesn't really solve a lot of problems. But they subsidize the private sector, and they got people to make, like I said earlier, ventilators. They had people making masks, and they also, had, hey, we got all this money, go ahead and make the vaccine. So of course you had Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and there was a curious email or some things I got leaked the other day about people really trying to push for Pfizer and them to like wait it out after the election to really come out with the stuff, which people were concerned about it coming out too soon, coming out early, not because people cared so much about the American people. I'm sure you guys remember Kamala Harris saying, if it's Trump's vaccine, I'm not taking it. Like, I wouldn't trust it. And so you have these people who are undermining the safety of the vaccine. And as soon as like Kamala and Biden are in the White House, they're like, oh yeah, you have to take it. Not that we want you to take it, like you have to take it, was their view. So it's amazing how absolutely dishonest these people are. But Trump was the one who initiated Operation Warp Speed. It's his baby. He continuously wants the credit for that. People who are within his circle still push and want that admonishment for it. So Trump isn't gonna go, oh yeah, the vaccines are trash. Oh yeah, the vaccines aren't working. Oh yeah, some people are having adverse reactions to it and so on. That's not going to be what Trump pushes. So for the people who are upset about that, I don't think you understand the man as well as you thought you did. If you thought he was going to just turn around and be like, oh yeah, it's like, I made a terrible decision, or they didn't, we pushed it out too soon, or that just wasn't going to happen. As far as what he said about people aren't dying from the vaccine, there were definitely reports. And I'm not sure if there are autopsies that were like finished, because people would say, well, this is going to take a couple months and stuff. I'm like, really? Because you knew when people died of COVID that they died of COVID pretty immediately, even when they died of like car accidents and other stuff like that, and nothing to do with like a respiratory disease. But there was a case in our state of a young boy who had myocarditis, and he died in his sleep after getting the vaccine. So and they were investigating it last I heard of that. And that was some time ago, but I definitely wouldn't say no one was dying of it. I played a video maybe a month or two ago of a father who was testifying at the FDA trials, I believe, where the panels, when they were deciding whether or not that was going to go through. And he talked about how he had his son who was a teenager, young man, and he thought he was doing what was best for his son, and they got the vaccine, and then he ended up dying afterwards. And so he said it wasn't worth it, and watching him grieve was extraordinarily hard. So Trump saying that no one is dying from it, he is a master exaggerator. I don't know if he is believes that, or if that's just exaggeration playing in. I definitely would not say that. And there's people who've had really, really bad adverse reactions to it. But at least he's still saying, hey, we should not be having the mandates. And if Trump was president right now, and if he were pushing mandates, we'd have a problem. Him and I would have a problem, a big problem. So it's funny that people still keep saying that the Trump people are in a cult, and there's some people who are like cultish, I guess, in their admiration, I guess. But clearly, Trump can say, "You need to do this thing. You need to do this thing," and people have even booed him at places where he goes and he mentions a vaccine and like, you should take it, and they're like, boo. And so that doesn't sound like the cult fighting. When the cult is fighting back, I don't know how much of a you can actually say that they're in a cult when they're not willing to just blindly do everything that their leader tells them to. On the flip side, it's amazing how brainwashed people are. By the way, I there was a video that I saw. I played it on one of my Saturday shows, but there was a young girl. There was a young man who's interviewing people at the mall, and there was this girl. She had long pink hair, hot pink hair, and she had a mask on. She said she was double vax. I think she had her booster too. And she was like, we still need to wear a mask and do what the CDC test does. So she had a mask on. It was pulled down while she was doing this interview, talking to them. And so I just wrote in the comments, like, she is like triple vax and still wearing the mask. And most people thought it was like funny, like, bro, it's so crazy. But there was a few people, they're like, she's keeping people safe. They're keeping people safe. And I'm like, these cloth masks do not work. This woman has 3 vaccines in her system, and it's still not enough. And the last line of defense is a cloth mask that everyone is aware of the fact that the virus is so tiny that it will just pass through it. And it's amazing that they gave people these savior complexes. Like, they were smart enough to say, hey, it's not going to protect you. So you can't be like, oh, I wore my mask and I never got it, because obviously, it's not going to stop you from getting it. But if you do have it, they're saying you can't. It's just stop you from spreading it to someone else, because it will protect, like, maybe keep a droplet or 2 in there, was the reasoning. Okay, so you can't give COVID unless you have COVID. So if you think you have COVID, then you certainly shouldn't go out to places where you can give COVID. And of course, some people don't know that they have COVID, but you're still taking that risk, right? You're assuming that risk that you might do it, right? So don't go around with your hero complex. Just stop the hero complex. You want to live like I want to live. And I don't mean just like literally just be able to breathe. I mean, live your life. Live your life. So you think you're doing the kindness, being a superhero, like your gosh darn Superman flying through the air because you got a cloth mask on and you're doing your part saving the freaking world. No, you are doing that so you can feel better about yourself while you go outside. And you've given yourself a hero complex. But the truth is, you are not helping anyone, allegedly, unless you yourself have COVID and you're protecting other people from catching what you may or may not have. But you might have it, so why are you going outside? Because you have to live your life. We all have to live our lives. So you take that calculated risk, just as everyone else takes that calculated risk, whether they get vaccinated or not get vaccinated, or whether they wear the mask or don't wear the mask. But we know the masks don't work. And people are starting to admit it. People are starting to admit it. People are starting to admit it. Now, why are they starting to admit it? Maybe because they know at this point, again, that economy is doing too poorly and that things need to change, that inflation wasn't just something that was going to be there for a little while, that these prices are going to be with us for a hot minute, and they need to try to shift and turn things around if Democrats aren't going to face like total destruction, not just in Congress, not just in the Senate, in the House and in the Senate, in Congress in general, but also statewide in different places. Though Democrats are really mucking up some maps. They are mucking up some maps to try to jerry rig and win in particular places like in the state of Michigan where I'm from, but that's a story for a different day. But it's going to be bad for a lot of for them. So maybe they want to protect, you know, where they can, or maybe things are about to get worse. I don't know. I'm not sure. Time will tell, because we've seen Biden and them sort of ease up a little bit, because after the 100, they're doing the 100 days of masking. They're like, we gotta wear a mask, gotta wear a mask. I don't know if you guys are gonna be able to have 4th of July. I don't know if you guys can have 4th of July. They're like, if you do the 100-day masking, like maybe you guys might be able to have 4th of July with your family. And it's like, screw you, man. I'm having 4th of July with my family. I didn't ask permission. And that's like not the point of America, by the way. Me asking for permission, to celebrate America. Okay? From the tyrannical government. I don't think so. But eventually they just decided to, like, one day, I think this because the polling was bad or whatever, like, oh, we can just remove the mask now. And all of a sudden, Fauci's like, oh, I'm not wearing my mask. I was concerned before people seeing me without a mask. No, I'm not concerned anymore because we don't need to wear the mask. And then it shifted eventually when they decided that everyone needed to vaccinate. And they did more authority. And they institute mask mandates again. And then people shutting down and whatnot. And I know that Biden is saying right now he doesn't want to have to shut down the country. And isn't it crazy that we're going through this winter time and they're just, it seems like they're backing off. I don't know if it's permanent. We'll see if it's permanent. That I don't know. But we shall see. Last thing I want to talk about, and I'm going over today, is this move with these teachers across the country. Now, really, really trying to indoctrinate your kids into these particular lifestyles. Now, I don't know exactly what to tell you guys, because I know there's so many people who want to fight to keep their kids in school, in public school. But at the same time, I really feel like you got to do what's best for your kids at the end of the day. And public school ain't it for a lot of people. It may be the most convenient for you, and it may be what your kids want as well for a little bit, but at the same time, they are really trying to indoctrinate them in every which way. We've talked a lot about critical race theory. I know they say that it's not in schools, but that's not true. The same people who say it's not in schools, like Kimberly Crenshaw, she's one of the people who, like, one of the lead, like, writers and stuff, creators of critical race theory. She's also, like, a woman behind, like, intersectionality. She was on Joy Reid's show. We love Joy Reid here, right? On MSNBC. And she's like, well, if it was in schools, I know about it. Well, she did know about it because she goes to different events and she talks about how it's in schools and how they use critical race theory insights, not particularly the doctrine itself, because of course they're not going into like really deep law theory in elementary school and middle school and maybe and even high school, but they do talk about how they have critical race theory insight. So she's done a couple different things where they've talked about these things in the schools, how they incorporate it. So they're lying to your faces about a lot of these things, and they do it gladly. I don't know to what degree, how much of the Democrats are playing along with it. Like, I think Joy Reid probably knows better. I think Joy Reid knows better. I think there's probably a lot of these local Democrat administrators who may not know a lot about critical race theory and may just believe the talking points about honest history and whatnot. And they probably have bought into the worldview of it a little bit. But do I think everyone who's pushing it is a part of some kind of large Marxist super agenda? Probably not. Like, a lot of them are probably like that lady I dealt with, who was the chair of the Oakland County Democrats, who are just like pushing it without knowing what it is, because they were emotionally instructed to do so. But in this case, with beyond critical race theory, there are teachers, and this is, if you go on TikTok and go into like the dark places where there's a lot of there's been quite a few educators who have had classes with students. And there was one video I showed to my dad, did a live with him because I wanted just to see his confused reaction in his face. There was a teacher who didn't have an American flag, but she put up like an LGBT flag instead and had kids pledging to that every day. There's this other teacher. Let me play this one a little bit. There's another video, but it has a song on it. I don't want to get flagged. So I'm thinking about maybe not playing it, just explaining what it is. But in the other video that I want to show you guys, it's a teacher. Who's non-binary, and she's playing the song behind her. It's the Adele song, like, "You're gonna wish you never had met me." So using that song is very adversarial, I would say. So she's looking into the camera, just like, getting in your face, and like to the parents who say that it's not like my place to teach, these kids these things. She says she's a preschool teacher, and she teaches them about pronouns and transgenderism, gender identity, and all these other kinds of things. And she's playing the "You're gonna wish you had never met me." So they acknowledge that they know that these parents would not like it, but they don't care. They don't care.
So I posted a TikTok yesterday about how I start conversations about gender and sexuality with my students. I ended up privating it for unrelated reasons, but I got a lot of weird feedback where some people like, you shouldn't start these conversations. You shouldn't talk about this with your kids. Yeah, you should. Because for these kids to know that a queer adult exists, to know that trans people exist and are normal, is life-changing to them. They need someone to start those conversations because they don't know they have the permission to ask me about.
So they may have her permission to ask about that, but they're aware that they don't have the permission of most of these parents to talk about those sort of things. Now to these teachers who are like, we teach these students all this stuff about all this gender stuff. I'm pretty sure they covered this stuff in kindergarten cop.
Boys have a penis, girls have a vagina.
Thanks for the tip.
Yeah, it's really that simple. It's really that simple. It's really that simple. So people, when I mention these things, there is pushback from time to time. They're like, we just want people to be accepting. First of all, if you want your children to live in a world where everybody just accepts everybody, that is like, you're setting your kid for failure, I think. And I did a TikTok about this one time, about how my sister thought her teacher was racist. My dad went to the parent teacher conference, and the teacher was like trying to explain all the ways that she's not a racist and whatever. She had a big speech, and my dad was like, you know what, I don't care, because she has to learn that not everyone's going to like her, and she still has to work with people who aren't going to like her. And my point was that tolerance is learning to work with people even though that they're not going to like you. And so that's just reality. You're going to have to grow up and go to work with people who are not going to jive with you. That's just life. That's just life. Kids are going to have to work together in school with people they don't like. They're going to have to work together in groups. They make kids do that, So you can want kids to play with each other, be nice to people, respectable to each other, but not everybody is going to accept you for who you are and whatnot. It's just that's not reality. So you have to teach your children, especially if they are different, how to withstand the storm. That's how you help your kids. That's how you help your kids. They don't have the goal of teaching people to be accepting. They want to vicariously live through a lot of these kids, and they want to teach them these things because they're very malleable. But whether you believe that is age appropriate, and in this case, we are talking about kids who are elementary school ages, like preschool. Even that one teacher who I didn't play her video, but she was like preschool. Okay. So if that's I don't think it's age appropriate. I don't think it's age appropriate. And a lot of it's just for confusion. But they are aware that the parents would not like this stuff. again, about 2 weeks ago, I talked about this on my show about how in California, and of course, it's in California, but this, I promise you, this is happening in other parts of the country, where there was two teachers who were, they would listen in the hallways to the students' conversations to know who to recruit into certain groups. They would not have official logs. So if parents ask, "Is my kid in this club?" They're like, "Well, we don't know." And they, during like the lockdowns and stuff, when people were online, they would spy on their browser histories to know who to recruit. And there was this 112-year-old girl who they convinced was a boy, and they changed the pronouns, they changed her medical history, and they left out important things like her allergies and other stuff like that in the medical records. They did not consult the parents about this. How are you going to change your child's medical records? I told my parents this. I thought Wolverine claws were gonna pop out of my dad's hands. He was so upset. And I couldn't even imagine like being a parent in that situation. But I, like, my dad, like, he was getting heated. He was getting heated. I'm just upset. And they're grateful that we're all grown, but they're like, this is crazy. My sister like does in school like home learning and stuff for my nephew, and she said, well, maybe when he's in like middle school, like maybe he'll go to school. And she was talking to my other sister about it. I'm like, don't put my baby in no school. You talking about schooling my baby? Like, like, no, please do not put them in public schools. And I graduated from public school and I liked my school, okay? But these people out here wilding. So they eventually called the parents of the school to tell them that the girl is now a boy. And when they didn't react the way they wanted them to react, they called CBS. And these particular teachers were part of a conference in California instructing other teachers on how they can replicate the same thing. And they also instructed them how they can do this even in conservative neighborhoods. So they are very aware of parents and their opposition to indoctrination with some material that is really, really not age appropriate. But they know a way of how to get around it, and they want to get around it with the parents. They see you as an obstacle. So you should be informed. You should really look into the stuff with your kids' schools. But personally, I just would never put my kid in a public school. I just would never do it personally. And I know that's a road that a lot of people don't want to accept and believe, and people want to fight for the public schools, and that's fine. You go to your school board meetings and you fight tooth and nail for your kids. You have to do what's best for your kids at the end of the day, but you have to know how many people out there resent you. And even at the end of the day, there's people who don't like homeschooling, and eventually people will fight against that too. In other countries, there's some countries where you cannot homeschool your kids. And there's really big opposition to it, and people don't like it, especially because a lot of religious people homeschool their kids, and they don't like the sort of values that you instill within your children. So we all have a big fight ahead of us. But it's not just in schools, it's also different TV shows that they watch. I mentioned the Blue's Clues thing. TV show Arthur had like critical race theory kind of stuff on it. There's like someone treated them differently because they're black. I'm like, ain't y'all animals? How can y'all not tell stories about discrimination but just do it from an animal perspective? You had to like bring in like a black person. You couldn't just have someone treat Buster bad because he's a bunny. Really? You're so uncreative that you had to take this issue, and you couldn't incorporate it within the world of this TV show. What kind of writers are these today that have zero imagination, zero commitment to the material, and all they have is devotion to their ideology? If I start talking about that, I'm going to be on here forever. I will be on here forever talking about television shows, TV shows that are really, really so politically driven today. And I'm already long, but I will say I think there's a lot of really interesting people trying to do creative things on their own right now. Eric July, he's with the Blaze TV, but he has a podcast for Canon's sake that I really like. He's starting his own comic book company. Maybe he can write really well. Maybe he can't. We'll see. But American comic books have really, really gone downhill. They hire a lot of woke people that say, if you don't like my politics, don't read my comic books. And then they're like, oh my gosh, no one's reading our comic books. Manga is outselling their big books, even like Batman, Superman, and stuff like that. And there was a hit piece that Screen Rant basically did the other day, trying to talk about how anime is and manga is more political than what you know. But it's like, it's nothing like American comics. They're really reaching on a lot of different stuff to try to make it seem like American, just to give American comic books a pass for the route they're going down. But if you see other creators who share your values, please support them when you can. So I'm interested in seeing, I haven't really read comic books in a while because I just haven't liked the direction of where they've gone, but I want to support like his stuff when it comes out and support other people when they start making stuff. And of course I have stuff too that I would like you guys to check out as well. I was excited to show my niece and my nephew this cartoon of David that Sunrise Studios, it's a studio in Africa, is making. I can't think of like the company that's behind the movie itself. I just remember the studio, Sunrise Studio, but it's about David. It's an animated cartoon. They're doing like music and stuff, and it looked really good. It looked like something that Disney would put out, but it's about David, by the So we'll see. Maybe I'll try to reach out, maybe have someone from that maybe on the show to talk about it a little bit. But I was excited to see a step in a good direction for content that is wholesome and something that is on the more conservative lines. And religion's not, really left, doesn't have to be left or right, but it's I'm conservative because I'm Christian. And I guess we'll just leave it at that. But thank you guys for watching today. Please visit blacktnews.com. Check out different content that I have on the website, like different articles that I have written about the subjects that I talked about, like the one I went undercover at the Democrat picnic, critical race theory, and some of these people overstepping your bounds as parents to try to indoctrinate your kids. Please check out different merchandise that I have in the store, like this It's Pumpkin Spice Season t-shirt, and I do have those in the mugs as well. The My Body, My Money, My Business shirt, because we are all taxpayers. You are not that special. The Constitution is a glorious liberty document, of course, Black Tea stuff. So go ahead and check that out on the website. If you enjoy what I do here, please consider going to blacktnews.com/donate and leaving a gift. We've had a lot of growth over the past year. I really appreciate you guys sharing and liking, subscribing, and so on. And I appreciate everyone who has given a gift. If you would like to support, whether it's 10, 20, 50, 100, whatever you can do, I appreciate that so much. If I know a lot of you guys, like I said, watch on Facebook. But if you can, please go subscribe to my YouTube channel. I would very much appreciate that, because there's like other features and stuff that you can unlock when you have more subscribers. So you can continue to watch through Facebook if that's what you prefer, but I do ask that you go subscribe on YouTube as well and follow me on other platforms. All my handles are at Black Tea News. With the exception of Twitter, and that one is at True Black Tea. And I did mention, my material. I do have different books you guys can check out. Super Kids middle grade fiction book, and I do have other sort of books for older readers as well. You guys can check that out at it's ninjadustpublishing.com is where my books are at. But if you go to blacktnews.com and hit the merchandise button, you will see a banner that will lead you to the website, and you can see some of that stuff. All my stuff is available on Amazon. Thank you guys for joining me today, and I will see you tomorrow. God bless.